Hello and welcome to the Age of Histories, everyone. Following the quickfire releases of the last 3 episodes, we have covered all 50 Civ castle designs that make up the definitive list of AoE2 castles for 2025. However, the compilation of this list has become quite the group effort, with many of you, my lovely viewers, contributing some essential elements and real-world inspirations to clear up some of my mistakes, and in other cases you even helped me find locations that I was simply unable to find. So to wrap up this series, I dedicate this final episode of the series to you, my dear viewers, in the name of clarity, accuracy and integrity. Let's wallow. For this castle design, I mentioned that it seemed to be inspired by the citadel at Cairo, given it was itself built by Saladin, its geographical location, as well as some other architectural elements. However, there were certain elements which I still could not find, primarily the peculiar design at the bottom of the towers and the crenellations. That is where Reddit, in all of its glory, came in to help me out when I stumbled upon this image by a user whom I could not find again whilst writing the script of this video. And lo and behold, there it is. The Castel Nuovo was built in 1279 by Charles I of Anjou, after he moved the capital of his kingdom from Palermo to Naples, seeking a new royal residence as well as a stronghold from where he could assert Angevin power in the region. During this segment, I mentioned that the Khitan castle, which is inspired from the Karakota fortifications, was founded by the Karakitai. But these viewers rightly pointed out it was actually founded by the Tanguts in the 11th century, which was actually one of the major reasons people thought the Tanguts would be included in the new DLC. But that is a whole can of worms that is beyond the scope of this series, and I do intend to eventually cover the game civs one by one and their real-life historical counterparts, but one step at a time. The Shu Castle was one of the major misses I swung throughout this series, and thanks to this viewer and the Reddit post mentioned earlier, we managed to narrow it down to the pottery models of the Wu Bao fortified estates that have been discovered in Han Dynasty tombs, showing multi-story designs with high walls, towers, gates and corner watchtowers. These reflected how these structures looked back in the day. Specifically, the devs took inspiration from this particular pottery palace created for an elite burial somewhere between the 2nd century BC and the 2nd century AD, that can be found today in the Henan Province Museum in Zhengzhou, China. This design was one more of those that I could not find, as apparently I was looking in all of the wrong places. Thanks to these viewers, we managed to track it down to the Bronzeberg Terrace, which was originally built by the warlord Cao Cao in the late Eastern Han Dynasty around 210 AD. Constructed in Ye City, modern-day Handan in Hebei Province, its 2 remarkable floating bridges cemented itself as a monument to his power and ambition. In 1988, the terrace was restored as a historical site to preserve its cultural legacy and historical significance. Thanks to this viewer who pointed me in the direction for a better explanation of the Berber castle design, I can now confidently say that the tower on the left-hand side is directly inspired from the spectacular stronghold of Ribat Monastir in Tunisia. Built in the 8th century during the early Islamic period to serve as a fortified monastery and military outpost to protect the coast from invasions as well as to support Islamic religious activities, its distinctive round tower provided a strategic vantage point for surveillance and defense. Ribats like this one served as bases of operations for the Murabitun, warrior monks akin to their Frankish counterparts in the Holy Land. Thanks to this viewer, I can confidently tie a bow around the inspirations for the Burmese castle, as what I had managed to find for the dome at the top required a bit of imagination for it to fit in. Instead, it seems to be clearly taken from the Mingalazedi pagoda that was built in 1274 during the Pagan Kingdom in present-day Myanmar, as a Buddhist stupa to serve both religious worship and as a symbol of the king's devotion, with its grand tiered design reflecting the architectural style of the era and intended to inspire spiritual merit and royal legitimacy. Thanks to this viewer, it was brought to my attention that the Inca did indeed have strongholds much alike what we in the West would understand as castles and served a very similar role. One imposing example of a pucara, as these fortifications are known, is the Pucapucara Red Fortress near Cusco that was built in the 15th century, possibly under Pachacuti's commission to strategically dominate the region. It, together with most of the other pucaras, were raised by the Spanish during their conquests in order to strip the region from such strongholds to make them easier to subjugate. Thanks to this viewer who pointed out an important inaccuracy when I took a jab at the Holy Roman Empire for not being an empire. While this was true in the typical definition of the word for the first centuries of the HRE's existence, the Golden Bull of 1356 did centralize authority around Charles IV and firmly locked in an imperial system, even though it remained incredibly fragmented and decentralized in comparison to typical empires. Thanks to these viewers who pointed out my error when I said that Karakorum was developed by Genghis' son, Kublai. In fact, it was the Great Khan's third son, Ogidei, who was active in the city's development into the Mongolian capital, and Kublai was actually Temujin's grandson and not his son. Thanks to this viewer, I got to see a gorgeous digital reconstruction of the Vilnius castle citadel as it was in all of its majesty. Following this, I have to say that the roofing of the Grand Hall is not at all inspired by the Trakai castle, but it was also itself taken from the Vilnius castle reconstructions. These viewers brought to my attention the possibility of an inspiration for the large round tower at the top of the Viking castle. Keep in mind that we all agree that this was quite a stretch, however it is plausible the devs drew inspiration for this tower from the architecture at the Bohus fortress and the Olofsborg castle, both found in Sweden. The former being constructed in 1308 by the Norwegian king Hakon V to protect Norway from the Swedes, and the latter built in 1475 by the Swedish nobleman Erik Axelsson Tott to strengthen Sweden's eastern defences against Russian aggression.
Wait a minute!
My son, I'm not touching that with a 60-foot pole. Next caller.
What convinced me of the plausibility of these two suggestions is the angle of the roof of the game castle, that is similar to the one we have in real life, and the shape of the windows that were obviously greatly reduced from the real-life versions. For the Magyar castle, this viewer pointed me towards the Bran castle, which was built in 1377 during the reign of King Louis I of Hungary, in order to defend a vital mountain pass against the Ottomans. However, I have to be honest, at first I was not feeling this one. Yet, one thing that still did not sit well with my explanation of this castle during the last video was the grand hall at the top of the game design. It was there that I started to see the comparison, not in an aesthetic sense, but in an overall vibe of a castle of that region and culture kind of way, if that makes sense. Again, this may seem a stretch, but the more I look at it, the more it feels right for some reason, and I believed it was worth a mention in today's video. This viewer raised a point about the color of the Portuguese landmarks that I deem not essential to the Civ segment when I was writing the script, but in hindsight it was worth a mention. The distinct white color of the castle design, as well as that of the Civs Wonder and Feitoria, are a nod to the Manuelin style, also known as Portuguese Late Gothic, that flourished during the reign of King Manuel I and is characterized by its use of white limestone together with ornate, maritime-inspired motifs including ropes, shells, and armored spheres. It reflects Portugal's age of discovery and it fits in perfectly with the period of the Portuguese campaign of Francisco de Almeida. Following the settlement of these much-needed corrections and minor points, I am happy to call this series concluded and I am confident in calling this list the definitive list of AoE2 castles for 2025. However, there are two more things we need to do before calling it curtains. Firstly is to share what this villager has been building all along this series, which is my favorite castle design, which I would like to share with you. Honestly, it was not an easy choice, given that so many designs are very well made and all have their little nuances that make them great. However, I must say that the Polish castle is my favorite design of them all for the literal one-to-one representation that it is to its real-life counterpart, the Belgian castle. Knowing how faithful it is to the real thing makes me feel as though every time a Polish castle is erected in the game, a small piece of history rises up with it. And I am a sucker for such things. But I do wonder what was your favorite design, so please share your favorites in the comment section below, as I would love to know what you guys think. The last thing that is left before we close this series is to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for your amazing feedback and the infectious energy that you have brought to the channel. For all those of you who are keen on what comes next, I will be working on another AoE2 story which will be released soon, and then in the next series we will jump into the wonders of AoE2 and their real life counterparts. So don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it helps immensely to bring this channel to more history and age fans just like yourselves. But goodbye for now, and thank you for watching.